Justin, will the meetings be on Thursdays from now on?
That is correct. We have a new time and a new date. As a growing small business, we're making changes, and some people reached out to us and said they've watched the recorded webinars, though they prefer to engage live. And our team did a little research on the best times to do a webinar. And Thursday at this time was a good time, but mainly a lot of people in our community were like, at 8:30 Pacific, I'm getting to work, I'm getting the kids to school, like I can't make it, and I want to prefer to do it live. And also we were doing 2 webinars a week, and the second one is essentially covering the same one we did the day before. We have set up a system where within a day or two of this webinar being complete, it will automatically be sent out to you and everyone on our list if you miss it. I can't believe you would miss this. It's the most more thing, I'm just joking. But if you do happen to miss it, absolutely, we've set up a system where it will automatically be sent out to you following a day or two. We're working on that process right now, okay?
Okay.
Thank you. So yes, every Thursday. It's good to see all of you. Happy New Year, happy holidays. So grateful that you continue to be with us. As I start my shtick here, I'm going to mute all of you. And then when we speak, when you speak, you can unmute yourself. As always, when you have questions, I encourage you to add them to the chat throughout this process or webinar. We will be adding links to the chat room. For example, Lisa asked some questions that have to do with mail. We have filmed a video that covers the mail process that I would encourage you to watch. And so we're going to put up myriad resources. I do want to address something because I do see questions starting to come in. Someone said, "Good morning, Jason." I'm Justin. My son is Jason, but I have gotten that my whole life. I take no offense if you want to call me Jason. We're just so grateful that you're here. As many of you learned yesterday by way of an email our team sent out, our good friend Sam Mangel is no longer with our company. He is excellent. He is talented. And Sam is doing what we hope so many people in our community do. They come home from prison. They've created a record. We help build a bridge as they transition to the next phase of their life. And I like to stress that we have a very capable, I think, we have a very capable team with a depth and breadth of experience that goes for more than 30 years, starting with Michael's journey through prison, through the time that I met him in prison, and we began orchestrating this plan together through 2022. So we wish Sam well. We will stay in touch with him. And if any of you have questions, you should reach out to us. I'm a co-owner of this company alongside Michael. You can call us, you can text us, you can email us, as Mr. Carper did earlier today, wondering what's the next step in the process. We're available by way of this beautiful iPhone that you can text and call at any time. I also like to stress and remind all of you, we have a team that does work if our team has been retained. Of course, we give away a great deal of information. Everything essentially we give away for free through Prison Professors. Some people we know choose to work with our team because that's time. That's an investment of our time and our experience to help you craft a message, perhaps for sentencing or for prison. But we're giving away tons of free resources. The onus is on you guys to go through them. But if you are working with our team, there are so many people on our team, from Larry Hartman to Brad Rouse to Michael to me, all of us creating this message. So if any of you are concerned or have questions about the primary point of contact, call me, text me, we'll discuss it. If, for example, we're working on a release plan, which is something that someone else on our team would do anyway, that's not a Sam or me function, that's someone else on our team. And if you don't understand that, that's bad messaging. That's my fault, and I own that, and we'll do better. But all of you will be serviced and taken care of in accordance with a clearly defined scope of work you have with our team. Thank you for the question. Let's keep rocking and rolling. I read a quote this morning that I thought was sort of profound, and I want to share it with you as we get going on this webinar, because it relates to a question that we got via email a few days ago. This quote said, "You can graduate with the finest degrees. You can read the most useful books. You can enjoy the loving support of family and friends, but your degrees can't take action for you. Your books can't make the decision for you. Your family can't live your life for you. There is no substitute for courage. At some point, you've got to make the choice." I share this because someone in our community attended myriad webinars, at least 6 of them, came every single week attending these webinars, yet received an email to my personal core links from prison that essentially said, hey, I just surrendered to prison. Like, what do I do now? Like, can you just tell me what I should do tomorrow and today? And should I immediately apply for the CARES Act? Like, I just got here. Like, what's the next step? Can you help me? Thanks. And that sort of comes down to this quote, which is, you can watch these webinars and you can even read all of the books that our team is going to send you. And if you've hired us in the post-sentencing program, we're going to send you these books. Or if you use the free content and you read it, but we can't force you to take action. So it was disconcerting when someone surrendered to prison after watching some of the webinars with questions of, what do I do next? Should I immediately apply for CARES and COVID? Am I sick enough? And it just showed they didn't do some of the work. There is no substitute for taking action. We cannot change many of the decisions that led to your government investigation. Earlier today, I spoke with someone who said, I want an assurance that this is going to happen if I work with your team. I'd love to offer an assurance. If I could, I would probably be doing something else. Your lawyer didn't offer you an assurance when you hired them. There was no guarantee that you'd get a shorter sentence. And I cannot change if the lawyer didn't ask for a specific prison or RDAP. If you expected a different outcome. Our goal is to ensure that you never speak about our team the way that so many defendants speak about their lawyer. I felt ignored, avoided, they said one thing and did another, they didn't manage my expectations. The lion's share of people traversing the system look back with a great deal of regret. If I knew this now, I would have done things differently. Whether you work with us in the post-sentencing capacity through white collar advice, where you digest and use all of our free resources through Prison Professors that white collar advice sponsors, it's incumbent upon you to do the work in between these webinars. And I want to make that clear, because I don't want any of you to send a message to anyone that says, what do? I just got here. Should I file for COVID and CARES Act relief? If you've done the work, that should never happen. I really want to stress that. Please be courageous. Please do the work. I know that it's difficult, starting with your reentry plan, which we have covered exhaustingly to the point where some of you may say, stop talking about it. But the truth is, there are some people on our webinars, I know because I've spoken with them, who have watched 3 webinars we've done on the reentry plan. They still haven't written it. They still haven't sat down to create it. They still haven't gone through the inklings of what a reentry plan would look like. That's a problem. So you've got to be courageous. You've got to take action. Per the email I sent out yesterday, I want to spend about 10 minutes going through some rapid fire questions that our team receives frequently about prison. And Matt O'Callahan, our client, our former client and friend, now home from prison from Lewisburg, welcome. Matt, if you ever want to chime in, just raise your hand. I'll call on you because you were just released from prison. I've been home for about 14 years. I don't want to profess to know everything. The reason that we have a team is because we can rely on that team and others who have experiences that I don't have. So I want to be very clear that I have relied on my team in getting answers to some of these questions. The first question we received from someone in our community was, how do I run my business and daily banking? Running a business from prison, of course, could be a whole book, could be a whole webinar, but here's some advice I have for any of you, and this really ties into the disciplinary infraction component. You want to understand that prison can read your emails, phone calls can be recorded, they can read letters that are coming in and out, and of course there's visitation. Would always be the best way to communicate and run a business, because in visitation you're together and you can discuss just about anything you like. You cannot bring notes into a visit. Of course, some people do, some people have gotten caught. That's a disciplinary infraction if you come or leave with notes. But if you have a business, I would encourage you to run it as best you can from visitation. Now, if there are things you absolutely have to manage, the second best way would probably be through good old snail mail, because unless they read it or make a copy of it, it's going to get through. The next best step, if you had to, would be good old core links, if you had to send an email. And then the last way, and the way that I would truly discourage you from running a business, is over the phone. We have had clients and our people in our community over the years successfully grow and run really big businesses. Are you able to see my screen on the, what do you see right now? Do you see this right now? This company?
Yes, Justin, we can see the page you have up.
Can you see this, the MeUndies website that just came up?
It's a
It
Word
says
doc.
routine surveillance
Okay,
from
no
security
problem.
companies.
So that's okay. So
Yeah.
1 second.
Get the
So
wrong
an
tab.
example of running, can you see the MeUndies?
Yeah,
This is an
Yes.
example of someone who worked with us going back like 10 years. This is probably a $500 or billion company now. Jonathan was mentioned in the Times article on our company earlier this year. Jonathan went to the low at Terminal Island for a year and a day, started this business shortly before he went in, and he understood how to work with his team, how to respond to his team, when he should respond to a message via email, phone, or in person. He had a great deal of discipline, and he knew when asked a question about a business to be able to say, I am in prison. I cannot offer you advice on how to run a business. I'm locked up. But this is something that you could consider as a reminder, I'm in prison. That is an effective way to run a business. Now, you should be growing a new business while in prison. When I met Michael in prison and had lost everything and was starting over, I worked with him on my blog and then my book and put that blog and book up on a website. I also understood the Bureau of Prisons policy, which said you can write a book or manuscript or blog as long as it does not get in the way of your work detail. So my business plan, all of that work was done with staff able to watch, put it out there for the world to see. And I understood the policy. You can write as long as it does not get in the way of your work detail. Myriad people in our community have literally built their business by way of writing a book or blog or newsletter. They are allowed to do it as long as it does not interfere with their work. Understand the policy. And when we send out the replay, I will include the BOP policy statement, I think from May of '97, that says prisoners can write manuscripts as long as it does not interfere with work. To banking, it's likely you'll get fired from a bank. It's part of the journey. We encourage you to establish new banking relationships every day, many or as many as you can. We suggest that you have a power of attorney. So if you get fired from a bank, like I got fired from Bank of America 8 days into my federal prison sentence, I also got fired from Merrill Lynch. They froze my assets because I was not prepared and I did not have a power of attorney for someone to transfer the money. And it took a month for the notary to attend the prison. And then even after the notary left, it took like another month for them to process it. So 2 months with my assets being frozen because I did not establish new banking relationships before my surrender to prison. I would also advise, oftentimes wives get fired, even though they're not part of the case. We have encouraged wives or spouses or even children to have a separate bank that has nothing to do with you because it's just an inconvenience switching banks. I know it's like going from Macintosh to Apple. It's hard. It's a lot of work. Prepare for this now, but it's very likely that you could get fired from your bank while you were in prison. By the way, any questions, please add them to chat. We're going to respond. Someone asked another question, any email and telephone restrictions? So you can add 100 contacts, 30 email addresses, and 30 telephone numbers. Of course, phone calls are recorded. You're going to see tons of iPhones in and around the prison. Matt, I'd love for you to chime in when we get into disciplinary infractions on the iPhone. Don't have to do it right now, but I do want to touch on that. So to the question of any email and telephone restrictions, you'll be able to call, you'll be able to email. It is a closed circuit quasi system, quasi like private email server. It's not like Yahoo or Gmail. They will log in. You will log into the terminal and CoreLink, TrueLinks in prison. You will send an email. I think it takes about an hour for the email to go through. Someone could download the app for $6 and get it on their iPhone. It's also free. If you just log into your computer, it's just $6 convenience to use it on your smartphone. Again, when we send out the replay of this video, we're going to send information on mail procedures, how to send email, visitation, phone. We'll put all of this in the replay so you'll have access to it. To phone minutes, I believe it's more than 500 minutes. Maybe Matt, you can put in chat how many minutes it is right now or anything like that. But phone calls are recorded. And I know some prisons after 15 minutes, they're going to shut off. They're going to shut off the phone. They're just going to shut it off. And you begin to hear a beep. When Matt would call me from Lewisburg, sometimes he'd say, I got to go. And by the time he was done saying, I got to go, they'd already hung up. So you want to manage your minutes as best you possibly can. Okay. Someone asked, how do I get my prescription meds? Well, something our team encourages you to do, and we put these resources up on Prison Professors. Matt just wrote 510 minutes per month. That's much more than when I was in prison. I think it was 300 when I was in prison. That's a thanks to the First Step Act. That's a good thing. Someone asked, how do I get my prescription meds? Our team would encourage you to spend time on the BOP formulary list. Go to bop.gov. Type in BOP formulary. We understand the list may be outdated. We prepare to the best that we possibly can. But our team would encourage you to surrender with medications for a couple of weeks. If you have yet to sit for the probation interview, make sure all of the meds are in the probation interview. If you have new medical issues post sentencing or PSR, it's a good idea to get those records updated. Surrender with medications, understand the Bureau of Prisons formulary list, and embrace the reality that they may transition you to a medication that you're not comfortable with, a generic, or you may not get it at all. And part of what our team is here is to teach you to advocate, to help you how to try to influence stakeholders. That's why a reentry plan is so crucial, because if you have health issues and ailments, it's something that you can share with a case manager or a drug coordinator, with all stakeholders. So to the question of prescription meds, we hope that you get them. We'd encourage you to prepare and plan before you go in with your physician, because I am not a doctor. CARES Act or early release options, and how do I apply? This happens a lot with even people who are in our community, and we cover it a great deal. Then what happens is you get to prison and there's this inmate.com with people telling you laws, things that are changing, you're immediately eligible for release. And people get a little, what's the word? They get excited, or they get hopeful, or they get depressed, and they'll reach out to us for clarity, even though our team at great length through these webinars has shared the policy and the law. And we've shared interviews with subject matter experts like Hugh Hurwitz, the former director of the BOP, walking you through the First Step Act and COVID and CARES in the application process. But to the specific question of CARES Act or early release options and how do I apply, our team would advise you, if you're looking to get out early due to COVID or CARES, to follow the Attorney General's memorandum going back to April of 20. And it currently states that if you're within if you've served 25% of your sentence and you're within 18 months of your release, that you could put in an informal request to staff seeking release based on the Attorney General's memorandum. If they don't respond to that informal request, you can then write an administrative remedy, which is a formal request to staff seeking an earlier release due to COVID and CARES Act. That would be the policy. Of course, we have all of these videos, webinars, plans, interviews for you to review. People on our team who are working with us in the post-sentencing capacity, we're going to mail all of these materials to you in prison. So if you need to file an administrative remedy, we're going to have that material for you so you'll know how to do it. Our message here is we want to teach you how to advocate. We want to teach you what to do. We want to teach you to teach yourself so you don't feel helpless and you're always reaching out with questions you should know the answer to by virtue of our webinars and materials. Of course, if there are major issues, we use the analogy of like a hangnail versus a surgery. If there are major issues, if you're not getting your medications, if you feel a trumped up disciplinary infraction, someone in our community surrendered to a prison that doesn't have RDAP because their lawyer didn't ask for RDAP and they didn't ask the judge to recommend RDAP or the right prison. He is freaking out because he's eligible to be in RDAP, but he's in a prison that doesn't have RDAP. He wants to get transferred. Even though we've provided resources, we can offer some insights on how to influence that process. We're here for the major surgery issues, not the little hangnails that you need to learn to do on your own. It's why we're teaching you and giving you this content for free every week. It's just your time. Other early release options, of course, there's the drug program. We know by way of the First Step Act, you're eligible for 1 year off of your sentence if you participate in and get the earned time credits. There's the Second Chance Act, which allows for more time in the halfway house. We've also done webinars on that. But I know the primary question here was COVID and CARES Act. Someone asked, how do I get clothing and bedding? To answer this question, I went to a great resource. I went to prisonprofessors.com, which is where we're giving everything to you. And on prisonprofessors.com, my partner, Michael Santos, wrote something like, I think he reviewed something from an inmate handbook at the federal prison in Miami. And in that inmate handbook, it said, upon arrival, the officer will issue the inmate the following things: 1 blanket, 2 washcloths, 2 sheets, 2 towels, a care package with a toothbrush, a toothpaste, deodorant, razor, and a comb. What you'll learn throughout this process is it may be slightly different depending on the prison. I read this list and think, wait a second, when I surrendered to prison, they didn't give me a comb. They didn't even give me deodorant. They did give me toothbrush, toothpaste, and a razor. Didn't give me any shaving cream. I borrowed that from someone. The point is, it's subjective. It's a little bit different. But when someone asks about clothing and bedding, they're going to provide it to you in laundry. They're going to give you the necessities, understanding that when you shop in the commissary, you're going to be able to buy more things, a better towel, some better slip-on shoes. They gave me a pair of shoes, so I never walked around barefoot. It's a little different when inside of the prison, but they're going to give you things. A question someone asked me, will I be handcuffed when I go to a camp? It's a very interesting process. In fact, Matt, if you're there, let me ask you, because this has been a very interesting thing. When I surrendered to prison, I was in handcuffs, I kid you not, for 90 seconds. I surrendered to the low, and they walked me through the yard in the low over to this van to drive me over to the camp. The whole time I was through the criminal justice system, I was in handcuffs for a total of 90 seconds. Some people in our community have never been in handcuffs. Matt, did they put you in handcuffs at all when you surrendered to Lewisburg?
Right. So up at Lewisburg, I tried to surrender to the low. They said, they said, you're in the wrong place. Walk on down to the camp. I started at the camp, no handcuffs. During my time at Lewisburg, I went out to the doctors or the hospital twice for medical appointments, no handcuffs. So the short answer is, during my time away, I was never put in handcuffs.
That's great. Some people are, some people aren't. I will say to you, if you are, it tends to be very short. It's part of the journey. Part of why our team encourages you to memorialize this experience, because it might have felt traumatic for the 90 seconds. I look back and now I'm able to tell myself, dude, it was 90 seconds. It was nothing. It's just a part of the journey. So you're going to see things differently. Like Mr. Carper's on here. His son Scott is in prison documenting the journey. His new newsletters are fantastic. I can assure you his son feels differently about prison a few months in than he did that first week. And because he's memorializing it, he sees the experience differently. You can measure and see the growth. His son is working on his reentry plan every day. He's awesome. I admire him. Someone asked, can I get my DOJ press releases down so this is no longer public? That's a big negative. I don't know the DOJ has ever taken down their releases, though I do know a number of people who have been exploited, including me. Hi, how are you? Nice to talk to you. I've been exploited when someone said they could suppress them or they could release them or get them removed because I was too lazy to do the work to create a reentry plan at the time, build a new record, and demonstrate how and why I could become better than these dreaded press releases. So if you are sick and tired of the government's version of events, if you don't like the press releases and feel as if they are tarnishing your reputation, if you're Googled and that comes up first, I would encourage you to do a couple of things. Embrace it. And two is, are you going to do anything to change it or just complain about the fact that they're there? Or three, are you going to work to create a narrative where while we can't remove them, you can put new, compelling, fresh content on top that shows what you've learned, where you're going, why you'll be successful upon release, your reentry plan. That's what I would encourage you to do. But no, I do not know anyone that has been able to get these removed so they're no longer public. Someone asked, if I'm retired, can the DOJ take my Social Security income? That's a big yes. If you owe money, last week, a nice woman, Jackie, with whom we worked many years ago, sent us a message that said, even though you've been off probation for 5 years and you still owe money and you've been making minimum payments, we're going to be taking 15% of your Social Security to pay your restitution. The only solace was it's 15% less she'll have to pay tax on. I tried to make her feel better. Apparently it didn't work. But to answer the question, yes, they can take your Social Security if you owe restitution. I've seen it happen 20 times in the 14 years our team has been doing this work. It's part of the process, unfortunately. Now, our good friend Lisa, thank you, has sent some questions. And I want to get through these in the next 5 or 10 minutes, and then I'll transition to disciplinary infractions. Lisa asked, when I'm sending myself documents, can these be in manila colored envelopes or are they better in white ones? I read somewhere the colored envelopes will get returned to the sender. Lisa, I am going to put in the chat for everyone to see a 5-minute video and link that Michael filmed on mail policy in the Bureau of Prisons. It's why we create resources to teach you to learn how to advocate. So when you're in prison, you won't have to send us this email because you're going to watch that video and understand it. To your question, yes, documents should be in black and white. That makes the most sense. Understand some policies are slightly, some prisons are different. Some will get through, some won't. Now prisons are getting things in the mail. They're making copies of it and then sending it to the prisoner because some synthetic drugs can get through the mail, which is why they're making copies of it. So in our opinion, I want you to watch the video. Black and white is absolutely better. We have seen limits of 5 items per envelope. So keep that in mind. If you're sending yourself bulk packages, it could get returned if it's more than than five items. And I discussed this with Michael and Carol. Some prisons are returning it if even the mail is double-sided. That happened at Terminal Island, but at Lompoc it wasn't returned. The point is it's the subjective process. So Lisa, our suggestion is beyond watching the video, we want, once you get to the prison, Lisa, we want you to find out what the procedure and policy is. So have mail ready to go, have your primary point of contact, which is the #1 tip we have for people surrendering to prison, have a primary point of contact. Once you have that contact and once you understand the procedures in prison, we encourage you to notify your loved one and have that mailed to you, because I may articulate something to you that works at Lompoc and then may not work at the prison that you're going to. So that's our suggestion. Wait till you get in the prison, learn the procedure,
Hey, Eric.
share it with your network. Okay, was someone going to contribute?
Is Eric?
I'm going to mute everyone. Thank you. Continuing on with Lisa's questions. One moment. Lisa asked, I have my release plan documents, a list of courses and programs available at Danbury and Amazon Book, contact list all typed out, everything that I plan to do. Lisa, I think that's a great start on the release plan. I love that you're doing that. Our team would encourage you, if you wrote a personal narrative for your sentencing judge, there may be value in adding that narrative to the release plan. You asked if someone on our team could review your release plan. Absolutely. I will connect you with Clayton on our team. We're going to spend a few hours with you, speaking with you and working on your release plan. So absolutely, we're not just going to review your release plan. We're going to help you. And that's something our team is happy to do with people who are working with us in the post-sentencing capacity. If you're just here on the webinar and not working with our team in that capacity, we have shared the release plan template, PDF and Word from Michael Santos. To the question of, will Larry be in touch with me in prison? Do I need any of you on my contact list after you surrender? Absolutely. You're going to add our team core links at earningfreedomcorp.com. You can add us to email. We're going to send you myriad materials, books that will help you as you go through this process. And when you have questions, Lisa, you're going to reach out to our team and we're going to respond under kind of that hangnail and surgery analogy. Right. But of course, our team is going to be here to guide you, and you're going to add us to core links. And when you reach out, we're going to respond without question. Lisa asked, how do you get home confinement versus a halfway house? Is there anything I could possibly do? I want all of you to understand the law. The Second Chance Act that was passed in 2008, I benefited from that, states that if you have a sentence of more than 60 months, you can get an additional 6 months of home confinement. Less than 60 months, the last 10% of that sentence can be spent in home confinement. The First Step Act, there were some provisions, I'm reading this, the First Step Act, there were provisions that overrode the Second Chance Act because not everyone released from prison or home confinement. There are different provisions. There are some people who make it out because of the First Step Act versus Second Chance Act. To your question, absolutely, Lisa, you will qualify for home confinement. You will qualify for the halfway house, potentially more time because of the Second Chance Act. And the question we often get is, how do I get that? How can I get more halfway house time or Second Chance Act? It's all going to come down to your adjustment, Lisa, your reentry plan, enrolling in as much programming as possible, avoiding disciplinary infractions. So when you go to a meeting with a case manager, rather than asking for more halfway house time, which is what everyone wants, you can demonstrate to them why you may be worthy of it. So Lisa, I know you're doing the work. I know you attend the webinars. I know you're doing the writing. While we cannot guarantee they will give you more halfway house time or halfway house time, our position is by advocating and learning, you increase your chances for success, and you're building a phenomenal record that will aid you on the other side of prison. So Lisa, I really commend you for absolutely doing all of this work. And by the way, on our webinars, we've covered the Second Chance Act, we've covered the First Step Act, and the reentry plan that plays a role in that potential early release. Okay. With these questions out of the way, and if you have more of them, please act. Someone asked, CARES Act is 25% or 18 months. Would it be applicable on a 24-month sentence? Of course. On a 24-month sentence, you would be eligible under this policy for early release due to CARES Act or COVID. You want to look at the CDC, they're making adjustments routinely. So this is the work we want you to do. So if you're going to put in an informal request for COVID, that you understand, are you even eligible? Are you qualified? And you want to understand it for sure. With that said, and if there are more questions, continue to bring them. I want to transition to disciplinary infractions. So many people in our community never imagined in a million years they would become immersed in the criminal justice system, yet here we are. And so many people frequently say to me, Justin, I'm not going to get into trouble. I'm not going to make any mistakes. You're kind of wasting my time. And frequently our team will hear from someone who has unfortunately gotten into a disciplinary infraction, gotten into trouble, and a whole host of problems follow. So I thought it would be helpful to spend some time going through disciplinary infractions, beginning with how they can even be initiated. Could someone engage me who has not gone to prison? Let's make this interactive. Jason, Art, Patrick, somebody, Kent is surrendering here soon. Can anyone offer any insights on how a disciplinary infraction would even begin?
Well, I think the devil's workshop is the cell phone. You could possibly be, well, you'll miss your family, and somebody can offer to say, hey, just make a call, and there's no big thing. A month later, they find every cell phone every time, and they draw down on the numbers, and there your number is from your contact list. Next thing you know, you're losing your RDAP, you're losing your good time, all over, a week quick call. So you got to be very careful about, how do you handle yourself?
You have to be careful, and all of you must understand the reality that it's obvious to you that the warden or case manager or counselor is an employee of the prison and has the authority to write a disciplinary infraction. What some people forget, the person walking, the maintenance person walking around the prison with the holes in his jeans and 89 keys on his ring chain, that person has the authority to write a disciplinary infraction. When I was in prison, there were some prisoners who spent a lot of time in the chapel working on events and Christmas events, but that chaplain, his allegiance is to the prison. He is an employee, and there was a situation where a series of prisoners became too comfortable sharing details or speaking openly with the chaplain in and around, and that chaplain went to staff and said, I think there's some problems going on here. You can never let your guard down. I know you would never do anything stupid in front of a warden, but would you in front of the maintenance guy? Would you in front of the chaplain? Would you in front of a guard that's been on the job for 4 days and is learning? So disciplinary infractions can be initiated in myriad ways. Another person may tell a staff member as well. There are people in the prison who may be looking to cooperate. An informant who is looking for wrongdoing, who can then go to a staff member. They may get more commissary, an extra hard-boiled egg out of the chow hall, more a benefit to them, a furlough. So you've got to recognize that everything you say and do, someone is listening, and if they hear that you are doing something wrong, they can go to a staff member and initiate a complaint. That's kind of how many people have caught cases, to use some prison parlance, because they say someone snitched on me or turned me in and someone cooperated. You think it's any different in prison? There's a lot of cooperators in prison. Cooperators wanted a shorter prison term, not judging them, understand it. A lot of cooperators wanted shorter prison terms. You know what some people in prison who didn't even cooperate in their sentencing will then do? Wow, I didn't cooperate then. I should now. I heard something. I'm going to go tell a staff member. Before you know it, there's lasting consequence. Keep that in mind. If the prison has cameras, certainly they can watch it. It's recorded. A routine review of a phone record may prompt a staff member to cite an individual with a rule violation. This is pretty common. Some people tend to speak really loudly on the phone, including me. That was a mistake. And if you speak too loudly on the phone and another prisoner hears it, they may go tell staff, or a guard may hear it. Right? A lot of these phones, the case manager's office could be 10, 20 feet away, and they could hear the phone call and say, what did that dude just say? I'm going to go listen to that. That's an infraction. Before you know it, you have a problem. And of course, a routine search of an inmate's living or work area may result in a rule infraction. Things that we have seen, of course, iPhones, iPads, chargers to iPhones. Oftentimes people will they may not be able to afford shorts in the commissary, or someone will have a pair of pants that they'll have cut off into a pair of regular shorts, which is against prison policy. Perhaps the staff member finds it. Some staff can get kind of petty. And what I mean is, when you leave commissary, this happened one time at Pensacola. It's only happened one time, but it proves that it could happen. When you leave the commissary, you get a receipt. And technically, you're only supposed to have things in your locker that you purchase in the commissary. So a guard or correctional officer walked around, found things in people's lockers that apparently they didn't purchase in the commissary, and wrote some people up for disciplinary infractions. Wow, I can tell you I had a lot of things in my locker that I didn't purchase because I'm sharing stuff with Michael. I'm sharing stuff with, hey dude, I'm out of granola. Can I borrow a Diet Coke? Yeah, when you get another one, just put the Coke back in my locker. Pretty common, but technically through a routine search of someone's locker, there could be some problems here. And I want all of you to be, aware of that. Given what I've just said, does that lead to any questions? Any of it concern you? I'd love to listen if any of you have thoughts or insights on the disciplinary.
Yeah, Justin.
Go ahead.
Hey, this is Brian Washington. It's interesting you mentioned about the, a disciplinary infraction for not having the correct commissary in your locker. In Louisiana, where I was, guys were getting written up for having too many stamps. If you're in that situation and circumstance, then it's a different economic system, and everything is paid for with stamps and, like you say, commissary. And there was guys written up for that stuff just for having too many books of stamps.
It happens. And of course, they don't want you to have too many books of stamps because people trade them as part of the underground economy or prison hustle. I do think it would be helpful to spend a moment reviewing what exactly are examples of a disciplinary infraction. And there's 4 series of them, series 100, 200, 300, and 400. And I just happened to pull this up from an inmate handbook at the federal prison in Miami. Series 100, greatest severity level prohibited shot: killing, rioting, encouraging others to riot, taking hostages. Pretty big deal. Now, some of you may be thinking, my goodness, a series 100 shot, this will never happen to me. Using an iPhone, as I understand it, is a series 100 shot. And this was written years ago before iPhones were so prevalent in prison. Now, they mention in here phones and things of that nature, but things have changed a great deal. There are people who have been caught using an iPhone who are getting indicted for new charges, and it's up to 1 year in prison for using an iPhone in prison. So this is the series 100 shot. You're typically not going to see them in a minimum security or camp. However, as we know what happened recently in Tucson in Arizona, a prisoner in a camp got a gun. There was not a strip search to get into visitation, and he tried to shoot and kill his wife and perhaps people who was with his wife in the visitation. Thankfully, the gun, it malfunctioned. These things happen in a minimum security camp. That's why you have to adjust and fully understand. It's important to understand the possible sanctions of a disciplinary infraction. Of course, you can forfeit and lose your good time, the 15% they give you. You can immediately go to the hole, the special housing unit. One person who joked when he came out, he was crying when he went in. He got into a fight in prison, and he went to the hole for 4 months, lost his good time, came out, and he's like, I look like Casper the Ghost. I've been in a dungeon for 4 months. He got into a fight, disciplinary infraction, lost his good time, was in segregation for 4 months, he didn't have visitation, telephone, or commissary privileges during that time. The only commissary he had was, I believe it's called like indigent items. He was allowed to buy only a handful of things while he was in the prison. He also lost his preferred housing unit, his bunk. Many of you, when you go to prison, are going to want to get the best bunk in time. You surrender to kind of like the front part of the dorm. And in time, you're going to want to work your way back by way of your adjustment, not complaining, avoiding problems, not cutting in line, washing your hand after you use the restroom, not speaking to staff, doing your job. So presuming you do everything our team teaches you to do, you're going to move back. Like, it's much more convenient and comfortable when you're in the back of the dorm where it's quieter because you have longer term prisoners that are more respectful. But if you get caught in a disciplinary infraction, you may not even go to the hole. You may not lose good time, but there's a chance they take away your bunk and they put you in front of the toilets all night, which sucks. And you feel like you're back to day one in prison after you've worked hard to work your way back. We want you to understand how every decision, we want you to be deliberate. If there's one thing that our team has stressed through decades of going through this wretched system. It's being deliberate, of using your critical thinking skills, and of understanding how everything you do in prison could influence your journey and your life on the other side, which is why we stress creating a routine that puts you in a position to avoid as much conflict as possible. Because I assure you, one of the disciplinary infractions is gambling and betting and finding a way to have more money go to other people's books and running out of phone minutes and having somebody else's phone minutes so you can call. That's what people tend to do when they're bored, they're not productive, they create drama. So we encourage you to create a routine that puts you as far away from these problems as possible. And that can include not spending a lot of time in the TV room at night after the weight of the day is behind you and guys are depressed, some are angry, they're watching TV, they're gambling, it gets loud. That's where problems take place. Well, we like you to get up early and get to bed early. Continuing on, and I'm going to share an example of how easily someone can get written up for a disciplinary infraction. Then there's series 200 shots, which are also severe, like demonstrating or practicing using martial arts, wrestling, or other forms of physical encounter. Well, I'll tell you, there's a lot of prisons that offer programming that guys participate in every week. Some guy, you could argue that teaching these martial arts classes that are very common is technically a disciplinary infraction. Do you get written up for it? Most likely no, but it could happen. Giving money to or receiving money from any person for the purpose of introducing contraband or any other illegal or prohibited purpose. Well, if they think you're sending money to someone to cover a massive gambling debt, that's a serious disciplinary infraction. Tattooing, you're not going to really see those things in the minimum security camp and whatnot. In a moment, I'm going to get into some common fractions that I've seen over the years, but here's 300, and we saw many of these. Misuse of authorized medication. I'm going to talk about that in a moment. Refusing to go to work. We know people who have paid people to do their job, and ironically, the person they paid to do the job doesn't do the job. So no one's doing the job. That is a disciplinary infraction. Some prisons, jobs, you actually sign in and sign out when you go to the job. Many times they don't. Sometimes it's random if they choose to do it. And if you're not there, that is a disciplinary infraction. I saw a lot of this and a lot of prisoners written up for this, interfering with the taking of count. So in prison, there is the standing count many times throughout the day. When I was in prison, the 10:30 a.m. and 4 p.m. count was standing. You get back to your dorm about 15 minutes before the count. You're standing in your cubicle or pod or open area, and the guard is going to count you. Sometimes the guards need to do it 2 or 3 times. It happens. They're human. They make mistakes. They got the count off. Perhaps some people are in visitation during the count and they didn't factor that in. It happens. But some prisoners would kind of say, like, my God, how long am I going to stand here? I'm missing my show. Get it together. This is the 6th count. Or they'll slam their locker. They won't even say anything. They'll just slam the locker. About 7 weeks ago, I attended a sentencing hearing where a judge filleted a defendant who gave a bad look while the judge was speaking. Didn't help him at the sentencing, okay? People are watching, understand that. Slamming the locker in frustration, the guard can feel as if he's being embarrassed or slighted. Just like that, they say you have interfered with the count, you lose your bed, you go to the hole, you're not visiting, you're not calling. Why? Because you couldn't wait 15 more minutes for the count to clear. Show some patience, be deliberate, understand if that were to happen to you, a disciplinary infraction, it only makes it harder on your family. Consider those things when you want to slam the locker or make fun of a guard who's struggling with the count. Working our way down to the lowest level series of disciplinary infractions. Conduct with a visitor. Okay, I've seen that a few times. Some fights, some yelling in visitation, some swearing. Technically, running a business is a very low level disciplinary infraction, but it technically is a disciplinary infraction. So before you go in, we encourage you, our team encourages you to spend time going through the inmate handbook in the prison where you are absolutely going to serve time, review these disciplinary infractions and give more thought to how you want to respond, because you know the consequences are severe. Now, our team would like to offer some suggestions on what to do if, unfortunately, you are caught, if you get into trouble. Can anyone share those insights for me? Let's just say you show up to work late, or let's just say the guard thinks you've done something disrespectful and you did it. What are some insights anyone can offer on how you should respond to that disciplinary infraction? I would love to listen for a moment.
think the best thing to do is just to be honest with them and apologize for whatever the action was and say it'll never happen again, from my experience.
Yes. Anyone else offer any insights on how to manage that? Okay. I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to write what Michael wrote in our lesson plan. And by the way, when we send this out to everyone, the replay of this, we'll include this link to the disciplinary infractions from prison professors. So kind of like many of you got a shorter sentence because you accepted responsibility and the judge felt you were contrite. So if you don't agree with, if you did it, you didn't mean to do it. If it happened and you know it's unlikely that you prevail, you've got to assess what's the next response. This is something that our team encourages you to consider. Michael wrote, if an individual is charged with a disciplinary infraction, although it's no, if an individual is charged with a disciplinary infraction, the first step is to decide how he wants to respond. In the event that the person wants to accept the charge and sanction, we advise people to respond as follows. I recognize that I made a bad decision and I apologize. Although it's no excuse, I've been under a lot of stress because I miss my family. I'm going to do better and you won't have any further problems with me. So one thing our team stresses repeatedly is putting yourself in the position of the stakeholders. The judge, the prosecutor, the case manager, your lawyer. And they expect you to deny, to excuse, to blame. So it can be refreshing for them if you say, I did it and I accept full responsibility and I'm prepared to endure the consequence of my conduct. In our experience, people who have done that, there has been no consequence for them, especially if it's kind of a very low level disciplinary infraction. Like, I'll let you go, it's fine, no big deal. Or you have extra work duty. That happened to someone recently. They had extra work duty, whatever it is. So we want you to pay attention to how you respond, though sometimes people's default is to blame and excuse, it wasn't me. And then if you go down that road, it can be very difficult if you say it wasn't me, it was this person. Then they call you in and say, well, tell us who did it. We'd love for you to cooperate and help us. Then you have a real dilemma. Do you cooperate or keep your mouth shut? Understand how everything you say and do in prison has a consequence. Now, if you want to contest the charge, here's how our team advises you to respond. When a lieutenant notifies a person of a disciplinary infraction and recites the charges, the lieutenant will ask the person whether he has any comment. You should consider responding. I would like to make a written response that you can attach to the record. The lieutenant may say, just tell me your statement and I'll include it. We wrote, the person should respond, please let the record show that I want to make a written response and I will submit the written response within 2 hours or within a reasonable time, but that same day. A written response makes sense for the appeal. When an officer charges a person with a disciplinary infraction, the odds are very high that others within the system will uphold the charges and impose a sanction. A fully documented written record will help the appeal. The record should begin at the earliest possible stage, which is when the lieutenant reads the charge. The written response should provide as much clarity as possible, citing witnesses if possible. If someone says, I can absolutely, that happened when I was in prison. A guard always accused people of smuggling things out of the kitchen to cook upstairs. And if it went missing, sometimes it was just misplaced. Sometimes it was taken, there's no question. And there was a time where some prisoners kind of at risk to themselves said, he didn't take anything. Like he didn't do it. I guarantee you, whatever, he didn't do it. You know, that helped his case. The unit disciplinary committee will likely find the person guilty of committing the offense, guilt or innocence notwithstanding. One could argue it's a little bit like a kangaroo court type process. Even if you're adamant that you didn't do it, I've known very few people to prevail. Those that accept responsibility tend to have a much better outcome. And sometimes it's just go do extra work duty or loss of commissary. Very few people I know have actually lost a good time. That's a serious disciplinary infractions. Of course, we talked a little bit about consequences of a disciplinary infraction, time in the shoe, going through an investigation, the stress, loss of good time, housing assignment, disciplinary transfer to another prison, loss of telephone, visiting or mail privileges, and in some cases, people are getting new criminal charges. Before I go to the last couple of points on our webinar, I want to address a few common things, a few disciplinary infractions that I've heard of since my release from prison. And someone's correct, Bart, good to see you, Bart, wrote policies vary from federal prison to federal prison. I mean, that's exactly right. When I was in prison, a lot of guards didn't care if you went to another dorm without permission. But I know we had someone at Fort Dix a long time ago, and he went into another dorm without permission, and they wrote him up for a disciplinary infraction. Guards are human beings. Some guards care more than others. Some guards are in a high security prison. They come over to the camp. They think it's not as exciting, a little boring. They don't care. They're like, go, I don't care. Just don't escape. Do your job. Some guards care more than others. Matt, I'll come to you in a second. Thank you. So here's a few disciplinary infractions I've seen. Not being properly groomed. If you work in food services, you can have a beard. There is no restriction on hairstyle or length of hair. But I knew someone who was warned 3 times from a guard that he wasn't properly putting the little mask over his face while serving food. And it was upsetting prisoners. I don't want hair in my food. And he's like, I am. I got a big beard. Give me another job. I put in for another job. I don't even want to work in the kitchen, getting angry. The staff member said, I've told you for a 3rd time. Put the mask on over your beard. And he responded inappropriately. They removed him from the job. They wrote him up for a disciplinary infraction. Was not doing his job properly, arguing with staff. He went to the hole, and it's a whole slew of problems. Just like that, it can happen. They're sewing in a lot of these prisons. There was a guard at Sheridan Federal Prison Camp who wrote up a prisoner because there was a pair of work-issued pants that were cut into a pair of shorts that he bought from someone. It's not approved clothing. So while walking to the chow hall to eat, the correctional officer called him aside and said, who issued you those pants? We didn't, not legal, just like that. One time, and this was truly awful, and the prisoner prevailed, a guard saw him going into somebody else's locker. Now, I will tell you, I always kept my locker open. I figured if somebody's going to steal my tuna or mackerel, have at it, because the consequences of getting caught are so severe. I had friends within the camp. You need to borrow something, dude, go take it. It's fine. But one time a staff member saw a prisoner going into another cubicle in somebody else's locker and coming out with food, which is pretty common because guys get together all the time and cook, especially if someone's going home, especially if it's a birthday, anniversary, or holiday. The guard wrote him up for stealing. I want you to consider those things. Some people will lock their locker, even if they're going to be gone for 10 seconds, for fear something could be planted in their locker, or just for fear that something could be stolen, or they don't want problems. I shared this story a couple of weeks ago where a new prisoner surrendered, attended a workout class, and the guy said to him, hey, it's like $50 a month. And he's like, well, I can't pay $50 a month. And a week later, a staff member found an iPhone in the guard's locker. He was set up with the phone. There's no question. It doesn't change that he's gone through a whole slew of issues that after a week in prison, they found an iPhone. In that case, if you're not going to adjust well, if you're going to go to exercise classes and not pay and make stupid decisions, lock your locker. Or perhaps you don't attend the workout class so you fully understood prison. You don't try to manipulate this environment or talk too loudly about how great the class is, or you don't do those things before you understand that perhaps this prisoner who's been inside for 14 years teaching this class, it's the only way that he has money coming in because he's been in jail for a long time. Think about these things before you say, yeah, I'd love to attend your workout class. I put on weight throughout my case. I'm stressed out, man. My biggest goal is to lose 100 pounds while I'm here. How many of you think that? I know I did. Keep these things in mind. Missed a call-out appointment. Many of you should check the call-out list every day. I nearly got written up one time because I missed an appointment with medical. I didn't check the call-out. You'll see the line forming every day to check the call-out list. You can get written up if you miss an appointment. A couple of times I know someone who got written up for using money in visitation. You're there with your family. You say, hey, Ma, would you like me to get you a Coca-Cola? Sure, give me money. Prisoners aren't allowed to touch the cash. You sit there. They go to the vending machine and get it. One time a staff member perhaps was in a bad mood or just very strict and said, you can't do that. You can't touch cash. You can't go to the vending machine. The person's visit was cut short and he was written up for a disciplinary infraction or something like that. Keep that in mind. Using the wrong bathroom at visitation. I tended to make this mistake. In fact, several times I would use the regular person's bathroom. And one time Michael called me aside and said, hey, bud, how long have you been in jail? I said, 3 months. This was during a visit. And he said, did you get a pardon or commutation? that I don't know about? And I said, no, I do not have a partner commutation. They said, so why do you continue to use the visiting's bathroom? Do you see the sign that says inmate restroom? Use that one. It's just so natural. You see a restroom, you use it. But I know of someone that got into trouble because he continued to use the regular restroom. But why is that relevant? Someone could sneak in drugs if they get it past security. They could put it in the regular person's bathroom. That prisoner can then go in there and get it. Some prisons, as we know, do not always strip search, come in and go in. And just like that, you have drugs on the compound. That's the approach of the stakeholders. That's how the government approaches it. Using the appropriate restroom is a big deal. One time, two more things. I want to cover this before we begin to wrap this up. Two, a prisoner got caught keeping the medication in his mouth. And his response was, they make me go to pill call at 5 o'clock to take my Ambien. I don't want to go to bed at 5 o'clock. I don't want to go to bed at 5 o'clock. So he got caught putting the pill in his mouth. He didn't swallow it. The nurse saw it, called him aside, wrote him up. And what is the perspective of the stakeholders? It's pretty clear. They presume that he didn't swallow it because he's going to go back up and trade and get items for it. But he would tell you, and he was being honest, I didn't want to take a sleeping pill at 5 p.m. I don't go to bed until 10 p.m. There are things you can and cannot control in prison. You may not be able to control what time you go to pill call, but you can control how you respond to it. Either get off the list and no longer take the medication. I'm not a physician. If you need it, get it. Or embrace the reality you're going to get it at 5 p.m. But you don't not take it. Just like that, you have a disciplinary infraction, 2 more. This happened during COVID. What was the prison? I won't waste your time with the prison. It might have been Yankton somewhere. It's a series 200 disciplinary infraction. It said, if you're not wearing a mask. This was before COVID. And a prisoner joked with a staff member that said, I don't need to wear a mask. It's a series 200 shot if I'm not wearing a mask. Here it is right here. And he kind of put it in the correctional officer's face, and the guard felt kind of slighted or embarrassed. And he wrote him up for a disciplinary infraction for joking at a staff member because the inmate handbook years ago says no mask. But of course, prisoners during COVID had to wear a mask. Something so stupid. And there's many, many other things. Before I transition to the last couple of points, Matt, can you echo my thoughts? Are there any ridiculous kind of crazy disciplinary infractions you saw when you were at Lewisburg that people need to know about? Because I know nobody's going to prison thinking this is going to happen to me, yet it happens.
Exactly. I don't want to share any sort of ludicrous stories. There's some things I really want to echo, as you said, that you said. There's a couple of things that weren't touched upon. There's some contraband, there's cigarettes, there's alcohol, even more severe, there's drugs. These things do exist. You want to not, abstinence is the best way. And what you will find, and this will relate to not only that type of thing, but being out of bounds, not going to your work. Misery loves company. So you'll find a lot of other inmates who are going to say like, hey, this is okay behavior. They don't care about these types of things. They're sort of looking for the herd mentality and sort of getting you under the fold. You need to be your own guidance and, act accordingly. Prior to going to prison, I don't think I ever read a handbook in my entire life, from an employee handbook to a health insurance handbook. I read my prison handbook cover to cover, and knowing these little rules helped me greatly. Not to sound like a Boy Scout, but having, when you go in for your team meeting, when you go in for any of these meetings with your counselor or the RDAP head, things like, the first question is, do you have any infractions, any disciplinary infractions? That's the first question. And to be able to sit there and say no is a really helpful way of living. It's going to make you feel better, and it's going to, make the process that much easier. So having a clean record is your best advocacy. It really is. And then lastly, I feel as though you're going to want to run a sort of cost benefit upon every decision, especially with the advent of First Step Act. I can't tell you how many peers of mine, nice guys, family, good guys, had phones. They got caught with like a month left on their sentence. And then not only did they lose good time, lose FSA, they've lost some RDAP time. But there's a chance, like Justin said, they're going to get sentenced for that phone. So, so you're talking about like a multi-year swing of their life just because they wanted to look at Netflix or things like that. So once again, abstinence is probably your best bet for all of these things. And then, my last point is there are random searches, even in these low minimum camps, low minimum security camps. They'll toss the place, and to watch the stress on another man's face to see if they're going to get caught with his phone is sort of it's difficult to watch. And you once again you wonder if the stress is worth the benefit of having that phone to look at Instagram. So that's really my sort of 2-minute bullet point.
I appreciate you sharing that. And we have to understand there are problems that are pervasive inside of these prisons. So when we suggest you put yourself in the shoes of the stakeholders, like a correctional officer, it's for good reason. There are phones in there. There are drugs in there. There are drones that are now popping up across prisons across the country. Their job is to protect the prisoners, the society, to ensure that things are not falling apart. We've heard about someone getting a gun in. There are fights and things that take place. We received a message from someone who was sexually assaulted in a medical facility. They have a job. They have a job to do. So while some say these correctional officers are taking it too far, they would argue, look at the consequences of we don't. If we don't take it too far, if we aren't searching for these things and holding people accountable, it can be real trouble here. So sometimes they get, complaints and whatnot. One could argue they're doing their job. And it's not for you to determine, oh, this is a ridiculous infraction, they're overdoing it. No, this is federal prison. And there are problems that persist. And we just want you to keep that in mind as you're working through this journey. Something that Matt touched on is very important. Do they ask if you have an infraction? Because someone asked us, should you disclose your infraction in the release plan you will share with your probation officer? We are human beings after all. We make mistakes. I know no one who's perfect. If unfortunately you have a disciplinary infraction, yes, you should build it into your release plan, articulate what happened, what you've learned from it, and hopefully you don't have a second one. So absolutely, as you build out the release plan that talks about programs you're participating in, what you've learned from them, books you've read, and writing a book report about them if you choose, a business plan, plans upon reentry. We encourage you to applaud staff if they're encouraging you and helping you in programming. That's a good idea. But if you've made mistakes, own it, because they're going to review the report anyway. They're going to know. And it's better than it's heard from you, because if they don't, they're going to feel like you're withholding. Like, here he goes again, told me this, didn't tell me that. What else are you hiding? So yes, if unfortunately a disciplinary infraction pops up, build it into your release plan and let your probation officer know how you've grown from it. I think that's a pretty good idea. Bart left a message here. Bart, it's so good to see you. Bart wrote, I called home to our landline. The person I called got an incoming call on her cell phone. She then tried to place the landline phone and her cell phone together in an attempt to have us communicate. I seized the call. However, I had to defend myself in a hearing because I was accused of circumventing the prison communication system. Fortunately, the hearing officer felt that I was not trying to break any rules and the case was dismissed. That went Bart's way in part because I know he adjusted well. He didn't complain. He did his job. His routine and his adjustment in prison put him in a position to avoid what could have been a really inconvenient consequence of something that happened through no fault of his own. But had he been a complainer and not done his job and was a show-off and mean and rude, kept a filthy lot, you could argue, yeah, he's probably right, but there's a chance to kind of get this guy. So we want you to keep these things in mind as you're going through it. Last thing I wanted to cover, a brief overview of the prison hustle or underground economy. We're going to discuss that in a later webinar, and I'm going to rely on my team to help convey the real depth and problems of the prison hustle. But there are some pretty obvious ones, right? Paying someone a book of stamps to do your job, paying someone to do your laundry, clean your sheets. Now, admittedly, I worked with someone who did my laundry 3 days a week. In my experience, there are things that the prison may be willing to overlook or kind of tacitly or not encourage, but look the other way from. And what I mean is they know some people in prison who are engaged in the hustle. It's the only way they have money coming in. They know people are getting paid a book of stamps to cook food or potentially do your sheets. And they understand that, but they also might have some sympathy for this person that's how they're making some money. But understand it is still a disciplinary infraction. And there could still be consequences if you get caught, because then you have to deal with how are you going to pay the person? They give you a commissary list or you send money onto their books. So the prison hustle is alive and well in federal prison. The best advice that I would offer is make sure you understand the environment before you try to manipulate it. And what happens sometimes in prison is you're really on guard when you get there. I've watched these webinars and I'm prepared to go in, I'm going to avoid, then you're there for 3 months or 6 months and you kind of feel like you understand this environment. And then that's when it's kind of easy to let your guard down. And that's when a bad decision can happen. So we could cover underground economy for days and weeks. Matt, I don't know if you have anything to add on the underground economy that you saw at Lewisburg, but it requires a longer conversation. I don't know if you have anything to add.
Yeah. No, I think you covered that well. Thank you.
Okay, good. Let's see if we have any questions here now that we've gone through the prepared remarks. I appreciate someone's authentic message suggesting that we call correctional officers and not guards. It's habit for me after all of these years. I'll acknowledge sometimes I say guard, sometimes I say correctional officer, but we are respectful of them because many of them have very good intentions. They do their job well, they try. And with some problems that persist in prison, they've got to protect the security of the institution. But I appreciate that feedback. I'll take it. I'll work on it. See if there's anything Lisa, you're welcome for answering all of your questions, of course. Someone asked a question I'm going to defer to my team to respond to. In fact, I think I'll ask Michael Santos just to film this video, Rosa. She wrote, if someone is placed in the SHU for being under investigation for an alleged rule violation, what is the time frame for case to be resolved? And is there a limit to how many days you remain in the SHU? Probably may not be a limit with respect to the time frame. I think they have a certain amount of time to respond, but the reason I have a team and I want to be authentic, I don't know the answer to every question. That's why I have a team. So Rosa, you have my word that I will ask this question of my partner and he'll film a video and we'll send it out to everyone in the community. I hope that's okay. I want to get you the right answer rather than telling you something you may think some answer you want to hear. I want to get the right answer. Let's see. Regarding restitution, it seems that your PO and financial litigation unit gave you a particularly difficult time. Was there something that you did to draw heat, or is that standard operation procedure? Yes, I wouldn't say draw heat. I had White Collar Advice had a lot of attention in 2019 because of the Varsity Blues case. So we were on, we were on Dr. Phil on the Washington Post and CNN and Fox and a bunch of documentaries. And the executive of the financial litigation unit, Mr. Lester, very nice guy, actually, I keep in touch with him, saw the Dr. Phil interview and went kind of irate, as he would say it, because he presumed that because I still owed money and I'm on Dr. Phil, that I owe tons of money, that I'm making tons of money. And when they sued me civilly, and I'd never missed a payment in all the years that I'd been home. I was off probation in 2012. This happened in 2019, never missed a payment. 2018, I'm sorry, never missed a payment. And I called him and I said, well, why would you sue me? I continue to make payments. And he just said, it's what we do. We want the cash. And so it was the attention that I received from that media, Mark, that led to them finding me. It also happened to Jordan Belfort from The Wolf of Wall Street. When that movie came out, his victims went apoplectic and they started calling the US Attorney's Office, demanding payment. No victims in my case were paid. Called. Technically, my victims had been repaid and I owed my money to the US Treasury. Regardless, that brought them to my attention. Now, a lot of people, when they're done with restitution, when they're done with probation, they never send any more money. We wouldn't encourage that. If you have created victims and you owe money, we'd encourage you to make payments, but that's your choice. We just want you to know the consequences that follow if you don't pay. And some people, they stop paying and they never hear from them again. I've gotten those calls. Like, I've been done for 10 years. I owe $3.5 million. I've never sent a penny. I've never heard from them. You're lucky. They've forgotten about you, or they presume you don't have anything. But sometimes you may be front and center. And when they do, they're going to pounce and they're going to try to collect. So I always found them to be again, it's understanding the stakeholders. Their job is to collect. So they're like, we're just doing our job. And I get it. He's actually they're a very nice guy. They're just doing their job. Let's see. Keith asked, does the First Step Act apply to non-immigrants? It's my understanding, Keith, that if there's an immigration or detainer issue, and things could change in the future, which is why we want you to create the release plan. We want you to document everything in case things change. But as of now, an immigrant would not be eligible for earned time credits under the First Step Act or halfway house time. So I know that's a consequence. non-immigrants also go to low security prisons. Someone in our community is going in for 4 or 5 months to a low security prison, and they're in their 70s, but they're not an American citizen. Also, make sure you have any and all detainers removed and taken care of. But Keith, to your question, currently it would be no earned time credits if you're not an American citizen. Okay, I want to see if there's some other questions here that someone left a message here. It's nice to hear from you. Will Rob still be receiving the books? Yes, per hour. I see you up there. We don't control Amazon. It's holiday time. We did order the books for Rob. They are on his way to him. I actually ordered a copy of Earning Freedom yesterday for someone new to our community, and Amazon said it's going to get there January 16th. So if someone can call the former CEO, who's the CEO of Amazon, get him on the phone, tell him it's taking too long. But yes, we are sending the books. We are sending the books to Rob at Terminal Island. Okay, it just takes.
Thank you, Justin.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you so much.
It takes a little while with Amazon. They're busy. We order them from our Amazon page. I think they then print the page, kind of print the book on demand and send it.
No
So,
problem.
yeah, but
That's fine. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Let's see. Yeah, Bart wrote, I've been in 4 prison. Rules and what you can get away with varies. Totally understand. Everyone who comes out of prison, do they owe money if someone is wrong? No, you owe money if you were hit with restitution or a forfeiture or a fine and that sort of thing. I have found in many cases, like in my case, I had a year in prison, which is pretty inconsequential for me. I found kind of the restitution and the collection, that was harder than the prison term for me at many times. I don't want to diminish if you're going to prison, but the collateral consequences of a prison term, the collateral consequences of a felony conviction are long lasting, which is why our team really stresses, we know you want the shortest sentence. We know you want to get out of prison, but if you're not prepared with this reentry plan, if you're not prepared for probation, if you don't have a plan to pay the money back, if you don't have a employment lined up, a lot of people are like, hey, I kind of got what I want, an earlier release from prison, but there's a whole slew of problems waiting for me on the other side, which is why we want it to be more than just shortest sentence, getting out of prison early. This is a crisis and it's a long tail problem, and it requires thinking and investing a great deal of time, in our opinion. That said, any questions that I haven't answered, it's either because I want to make sure I don't have the right answer. I want to make sure I get the right answer. And if I don't, our team will film it and we'll send it out to everyone. Okay, including questions about the projected release time on 14 months on the CARES Act and whatnot. To the question of will restitution be transferred to family members, such as will my children be responsible when they have a job or when I retire? Not in my, you're welcome. Not in my experience. No, it's your debt. It's not their mistake. I'm not a financial planner. I'm not an estate attorney. I do know people who have inherited money and the government learned about it and they took it, which is why estate planning matters, because in your judgment and commitment order, it probably says any inheritances, tax lottery, winnings, tax refunds, the government is subject to take. Harder when you're done with probation because they're not scrutinizing you. But no, that restitution doesn't get transferred to a family member. They could be responsible for helping make the payment. In other words, you come home, you say, hey, I'm going to be Mr. Dad for a while. My mom's working. I can't make a restitution payment. I don't make any money. One, that doesn't advance your agenda with probation because they're going to see you're trying to avoid a debt. And two, what some probationers have said is, you live with your wife, she works. Do you drive in a car that she pays for? Yes. Do you live in this home that she pays for? Yes. Do you eat food that she pays for? Yes. Great. So her income helps subsidize your lifestyle. She's going to help offset your $500 a month payment. Keep these things in mind. But in my experience, no, it's not going to transfer to your children and whatnot. You're welcome, Keith. Thank you for the question. I think, Mark, I'll get confirmation on that question about the CARES Act 24 or net. I think it gets reduced. Mark, let me get the exact answer to the question. I think I know, but let me speak with my team. And part of the reason we retain subject matter experts, Mark, is for that reason. Oh, last thing I'll say before I go. Next week, I'm going to interview John Gustin. okay, who is awesome. John has done an interview with our team. One moment. And I really encourage, I mean, this is learning from like a real expert. I mean, you're learning from someone who knows every intricacy or detail of the system. We're going to talk about halfway houses and home confinement, the reentry plan, how do staff members look at you, working on the release plan, the messaging. If there are only 7,000 beds available in the country, what can you do to position yourself for that? So we're going to do a question and answer next week with John Guston, where we're going to cover halfway houses and home confinement. He was the head administrator of the Residential Reentry Center, overseeing all halfway houses and home confinement programs across the country. So if you have questions about halfway house and home confinement, he's going to be with us live, where I and others in our community are going to be asking questions. So I feel like such a marketer. Don't miss this, one time only. But this is a good kick-ass interview that's really going to help you prepare. And I want you to, I'll send out many reminders and we'll go through it, okay? With that said, thank you to all of you for joining our community. We're incredibly grateful. Hope you have a wonderful and safe new year as we transition into 2023. Know that our team will be here to help you, whether it's through our free webinars and resources that we give away through the nonprofit, or if you our team. We're just very grateful you let us come into your lives during this crisis, and we'll continue to work to prove worthy of your time and support. Okay.
Justin, is that interview with John Guston going to be on YouTube, or how do we?
No, we're doing it in our webinar next week, 10 a.m.
Oh, we're doing it here with everybody?
Oh, yeah. I'm going to interview him. It's going to be John and me. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
He's going to be here. It's sort of a big deal. Yeah. He's going to be here for the webinar next week.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, everyone. Thank you all very much. Have a wonderful and safe new year. I'll be in touch.